Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TeqTalk. Today, I'm honored and thrilled to introduce someone whose career has literally shaped the technology in our pockets and might soon shape how we age and heal. So, Dr. Ronjon Nag, he has spent over 40 years pioneering AI breakthroughs from the first speech recognition to the very first predictive text and speech recognition phones. Well, he didn't stop there. He sold his companies to Apple, BlackBerry, and Motorola, and then went on to found R42 Group, where he invests in pre-seed AI and biotech startup firms, which are effectively fueling the next wave of world-changing innovations. Also, as an adjunct professor at Stanford, he inspires the next generation of thinkers in AI, genetics, longevity science, and venture capital. Recognized with numerous honors, including the IET Mountbatten Medal, the COGEX AI Lifetime Achievement Award, and induction to the Silicon Valley Engineering Council Hall of Fame, Dr. Nag continues to shatter the boundaries, proving that relentless curiosity and commitment can really redefine our future. So grab your seats because this conversation is guaranteed to spark the ideas and ambition. Dr. Nag, it's an honor to have you with me today. Thank you so much for coming to the podcast.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, Dr. Na, your career trajectory is extraordinary. I mean, starting with the groundbreaking innovations in speech and handwriting recognitions to now leading advancements in longevity science and AI driven healthcare. So, let's rewind a little bit to early days of your career in 1980s, a time when speech and handwriting recognition were kind of pure science fiction, and you didn't just imagine them, you innovated them, I would say. So you founded Alexicus, Cellmania, and we have done a lot of research, and I know a little bit more about you from the Stanford days, so which later acquired by Motorola and BlackBerry. So could you tell me a bit about these ventures and how they shaped you and your journey as an innovator and entrepreneur?
Yeah, certainly, I was sort of academic at the beginning, my first AI system was in 1983, it's like over 40 years ago.
Wow.
In those days, it was just telephone digit recognition. We were trying to recognize telephone digits. And literally, people would fall off their chair when I'd explain, I'm trying to make a machine that can understand human speech. And they'd only seen it in science fiction. And so people couldn't really fathom it. And of course, in 1983, we were working on telephone digits. In 2003, it appears on people's phones. Uh, I was basically doing that at Birmingham University as an undergraduate. This is an undergraduate final project. And then went to Cambridge and started working more on more advanced statistical techniques. In those days, there was a sort of a push-pull between what we call rule-based systems, where you sit a person down and write down all the rules of why you think a word sounds like this and sounds like that. And of course, everyone has different accents. It's quite difficult to capture every single variation of why a word sounds a particular way. Um, and so that was just the beginning in the 80s, moving towards a data-oriented solution where we collect lots of data and collect statistics on the data. And at Cambridge, they wouldn't make me a fellow, so I had to start companies. Had to go to MIT instead, and went to MIT, looking at finance, AI for finance, and finally at Stanford, looking at neural networks, a topic called neural networks, where we really the modern AI is based on these techniques, where we're looking at the foundations of how the brain works and make mathematical models. And interestingly enough, that was not in the computer science department, not the engineering department, but actually the psychology department. And a lot of the work was done in neural networks outside of computer science departments in those days, in other departments, engineering, mathematics, and even psychology, even linguistics for that matter. Right around that time, the traditional career track was to start, continue as an academic, be a professor, write articles. And I was probably at the beginning of a trend to not do that.
Mhm.
Or instead of just researching something and having a paper written that a few people read, can we actually get it into something that people actually use? And if you have the end goal, the moonshot goal of having a machine that can understand conversation, that at that time was too difficult to do all at once. Let's try a simpler goal, a mini goal. And that was Lexicus, which we did handwriting recognition, but we could do cursive. Everyone else could only do one letter at a time, print.
Yeah.
Even today, cursive is quite difficult because you don't know where one letter begins and one letter ends. And when you do a T cross back and T cross it, so it's not even sequential. And Lexicus at our peak, we were 3 people, and we were able to come up with models that could understand cursive handwriting recognition. And then Motorola bought that company,
Mhm.
and Motorola, we had lots more resources. We also had a market. If you could just get a technology into a phone, then automatically you'd have a third of a market at that time. And so we sort of ran speech recognition into the phones. We ran handwriting recognition, uh, and also did a lot of work in Chinese. At the time, Motorola had a big chunk of the Chinese market, and this problem on how are you going to do texting in Chinese, because Chinese is 20,000 characters. How do
Right.
you get characters into the box? And so we needed more innovative entry systems. So certainly handwriting, but keyboard predictive text from just 10, 12 key buttons. How do you get as many as 20,000 different characters? And, by the end of it, we had phones with handwriting, speech recognition, browsers, games, apps. And then I was looking out my window and then saw the internet was happening. And one thing, you got to sort of see what's happening and know when it's there. And I said, well, okay, how do you get the internet on a phone? And so the first invention in that era was invented the first mobile app store
Yeah.
in 1999. This was so many years before Apple had their app store. People didn't really understand what we were doing until really Apple, 7, 8 years later, came out with theirs. Oh, then they understood what we were doing. That company was Cellmania, and we sold that to BlackBerry, to a real BlackBerry, who were fixated on keyboard phones beforehand, but they are now sort of moving towards smartphones. A big chunk of the smartphone market at that time, before Google and Apple came in and tried to defend that turf. And basically, again, same. You have a market. If you can get it into the phone, then you get people using it. And we had billions of downloads, and put millions of people into jobs, into engineering jobs, because it just cut out that middleman. Before that, you had to write a piece of software, put it on a disk or CD-ROM, and put it in a box and mail it. Here, you could just access it on your phone and have access to it. And then I was more the advisor and to Vocal IQ, which we sold to Apple. So one to Motorola, one to BlackBerry, and one to Apple, and that was the more dialogue systems.
Yeah, I think Siri, right? So you had some
It's
contribution to that.
after Siri, it's actually making Siri better.
Yeah.
So some of the things we're doing right now, which is our dialogue systems, in trying to think not just one question at a time, but think about multiple questions, remembering the state previous questions of what the answers were. And certainly at BlackBerry, we had a similar kind of thing, that we connected to many different APIs, connecting knowledge into the machine. But really, the last 10 years, really looking at machine learning for biology. Went back to Stanford University, where I'm now an adjunct professor in the genetics department. And the body is extremely complex. The body is very difficult to model as a result. And historically, it's, you can think about it really sort of a trial and error approach about what works and what doesn't work. And when you take a pill, when you have a treatment, a lot of it is through many painstaking hours by scientists, doctors, and patients.
Yeah.
Uh, Many risks that have been taken. Today, we're hoping that the tools we have today to manage complexity, to manage the quantification of all these experiments that we do, can actually reduce the risk for all concerned, reduce the cost, and increase the pace of treatments. And certainly, one of the ideas here is that complexity is rife in medicine. So typically, people do what we call trials, and
Yeah.
the phase one trial, which is just safety by itself, where you just might be 12 people. The phase two trial, which is maybe dozens or hundreds of people, where you just say, well, does it actually work? We figured out it's safe, but does it actually help anybody?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the ideas which you have shared right now, they are so inspiring. And I would like to understand more from you. I mean, we are still discussing on Lexicus and your innovations in the early days of mobile, right? So, what was the vision? I mean, I can see that the vision was very, very clear, and you wrote lot of articles, and you had the vision for future, and those things came true. Actually, we'll discuss more about them in our later half. So now my question is, what sparked you an idea for handwriting and speech recognition? Was there any situation which developed this idea, or it was kind of gradual innovation and work you were doing, and then you thought that you and your team thought that, okay, this is going to be a great thing in the future, we can go and develop this? How confident were you when you were starting that, okay, let's try with this, we are not sure it's going to work or not, or you were pretty sure that, yeah, it's going to change the world?
Well, I think I was brought up watching science fiction movies and science
Mhm.
fiction TV programs, in particular Star Trek, and then that was set in the year 2300. And I just thought, well, can we actually do any of these things? Even as an undergraduate, the projects used to come up, but then usually very sort of academic, research-oriented project with limited computing power. And even if you could make it work, you might get the answer back, 10 seconds later or 20 seconds later. Not particularly, you could say, okay, I can recognize the digits, but the answer's coming back 20 seconds later. So for academic purposes, it's fine, but it's not fine for real world. And when you start looking at this, you start looking at the problem and thinking, certainly people who have done their just finished their PhDs, and I think that was where I was at my point, where you say, okay, we can, this thing might actually be possible. We have got these blockers of computing power, memory, uh, and we've got these new techniques available. You play it forward, well, maybe they'll intersect where we have just enough computing power, and we do enough clever tricks to try and reduce the computing power. And that's what's kind of happening now. People are complaining about the amount of computing power and memory and energy that these latest AI systems work. But people are now starting to think, well, how do I do it with much less um, uh, computing performance and get the same answer? And that's kind of where I was at that time in the late 80s and early 90s. Well, actually, this might actually be possible. And trying to think about, well, then if you could put a team together, can we think about where the moonshot's going to happen and work backwards? And yeah, literally 83 was really 10 years ahead of of Lexicus. And I was an undergraduate, and Lexicus was doing cursive handwriting recognition. I think it took about 20 years after that before it sort of appeared on phones. Speech appeared a bit earlier in car phones to stop people crashing their cars and to dial numbers instead and dial names. And then you had things like Siri pop up where you have more conversational. Now Siri was really doing intent recognition. It wasn't recognizing every single word.
Mhm.
And it was, they had the brilliant innovation. Say, well, actually, we don't need to recognize every single word. We can just recognize some keywords and give back the right response. So,
Right.
I want to know what the weather is in Palo Alto. You just need weather and Palo Alto. You don't need I want. All those other words are extraneous. You get those two words right, then you can give back the right answer, the weather, and the user doesn't really know whether they got every single word right. Now you're getting bigger performance, better performance that you can actually almost get pretty much every single word right. But the understanding now is different. What's the actual understanding? So it's trying to think about what is possible. Like when JFK said, "Let's go to the moon," I think his advisors told him it's a very difficult problem. Like, there's not actually any fundamental laws of physics problem why we can't do this. It's going to be a very difficult engineering problem, a very difficult execution problem. If you played it forward in my era, it was the same problem, but this time you had uh, modules you could build on. I
Right.
didn't have to build the chip. I didn't have to build an operating system even. No, we could just work on our components, what we could do. You're working within an ecosystem. The first moonshot, NASA actually had to build the ecosystem for almost every single component. Now it's getting a little bit easier in space, because like people who've spent many decades making spacesuits and making rockets and making engines and making monitors and sensors, and you can buy the chips from all kinds of semiconductor companies. There's a big infrastructure. In today's entrepreneurial world, the entrepreneurs today are very lucky because there's a large ecosystem. You don't have to build the whole thing. You don't have to build the internet.
Exactly. I
Yes.
that was already there for the entrepreneurs. They have to do some kind of small innovations. So yeah, I think it is much easier in today's world, and the scope is also wide. So yeah.
That's for
So
the small innovations, and there's lots of them. Now, there's still room for big innovations, um, there's still in the space area, we still have to get to Mars and other planets, but in the digital world, in the medical world, certainly I want to cure aging, and that sounds
yes.
nice.
Yeah, that is very interesting. Interesting. I mean, topic which you are working on, and I would like to deep dive into this longevity, right? And you are the founder of Ikshana Therapeutics, and you're working a lot on longevity. Tell me more about it and how it is really going to impact the world. Is it through cellular manipulation or through vaccine injection? Provide me more information on that.
Certainly, well, there is a natural aging of the population
Yeah.
happening right now. There's 10,000 people hitting the age of 65 every day. Uh, there are going to be significant demographic changes. Historically, there's a large body of young people who pay taxes, social security taxes, that pays for the older population who live a certain lifespan. That lifespan time is extending in most areas of the world. Temporarily, it's actually dropped in the United States. The average age of death for men is 76. The key word being average. It used to be 78.
Yeah.
The key word being average. There are more people hitting the age of 100 than ever before. And certainly you see that people who have access to good healthcare systems, uh, they have access to good behavioral systems. They do their exercise, their diet,
Mhm.
and many of it is now in the news. People are thinking about it. The low-hanging fruit's been done, sewage systems, water, sort of vaccinations against major diseases. People are sort of living longer naturally. But there's two concepts in lifespan. One is lifespan, which is the number of days you can last, and the other concept is health span, which is the number of healthy days you can last. Because not many people want to live for 5 years in misery, more like 5 days in misery. Most of us would like to just get to the end and then keel over. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen as often as we'd like. It's very often many, many years of misery. So when you ask people, would you like to live longer? Would you like to live 120? Would you like to live 150? Often people say no, because I don't want to be miserable and aching and having pains and illnesses and having to get up to go to the toilet five times a night, all these kinds of things. I don't want to have that, and I don't want to be a burden on my family.
Right.
Now, if we switch the question around, let's assume you're as healthy as you are now. Now, do you want? And often the answer is still is then different. Yes, of course, I'd like to live longer. I've got more to contribute to the world, and I'd like to do more things. I'd like to finish more projects. Some projects may only be possible if you can actually spend 40 years on them. Climate change is a difficult problem.
Right.
And maybe we're hampered because people retire and die off and they can't continue, and it's handed over to another generation. And there's always a blip when the handover occurs. And it's getting easier because we have things like computers now and digital storage and stuff like that, and we can sort of hand things over in a more gradual sense. There's infrastructure there, as we said before. But what we need to do, this is another moonshot, and it feels like 1983, but now we're in 2024, where we're saying, let's have a vaccine for aging. What does that mean when I say that out there? And it's kind of like a JFK moment, right? So let's get a moonshot for a vaccine for aging. How would we do that? How would we do that? Now, doing it all at once might be quite a difficult problem. What does it even mean, right? Does it mean you stop aging? Just stop. Now, no, if I'm 18, maybe I don't want to stop me. It's I want to get a bit more. If I'm 60, maybe I don't want to just stop. I want to reverse it a bit as well. Does that mean I can reverse it as well? So what we've done, what I started was a venture firm, R42, and at this point we have about 40 million invested, and we've invested in many longevity science ideas and companies and products, often linked with an AI component, because AI is basically increasing the manipulation of complexity
Right.
to actually come up with a solution. It's actually too difficult a problem for a human to actually solve. You can say how we'd solve it, but we can't solve it in our heads. Um, and again, we're sitting in 2024 with now many public databases available, many tools available where you can just go online and start programming, start designing peptides, designing drugs just from your desktop. You still have to do trials, you have to see if it will work. My vision, though, and maybe it's 20 years, maybe it's 100 years,
Mm-hmm.
be like Star Trek, you actually won't need to do the trial. You just run it computationally and you'll actually believe the computation. And actually, even if you did the trial and the trial didn't agree with the computation, you trust the computation more than you do the trial. It's a bit like gravity. We know formula for gravity, and you can drop a ball 1,000 times and try and measure the speed of the ball uh, hitting the floor. And you'll probably find that it's not 9.81 meters per second. So do we say Isaac Newton was wrong? No, we don't say that. We say we did the trial wrong. We know there's air pressure and air resistance and all kinds of things going on in a real trial, whereas the formulas for gravity, calculus, predict exactly what the speed should be and will be in a vacuum, obviously. So this is where we are starting to, trying to get to that stage in medicine.
Mm-hmm.
Can we actually put all the knowledge that the whole world knows? Can we actually get databases? And we have like 3 or 4 sort of key companies that are trying to work on this area. So one I'll talk about Agemica first, which we're saying, okay, we want to, that really has the vision to come up with an aging vaccine.
So, is there any vaccine which is already live, or they are all still in the trial?
Not even in the trial yet.
Not even in the trial yet.
Well, maybe in the trial, things about to come into the trial. Many of these companies are about to hit the trial for particular age-related diseases. Aging is not considered a disease by the FDA. So even if you had a treatment for aging, you couldn't actually prescribe it because
Yeah.
the FDA won't approve it. So what you have to do is look at diseases that are correlated with aging. Certainly cancer, certainly cardiovascular disease is the number one
Yeah.
killer. Certainly neurodegenerative diseases that are out there. And many of these are correlated. It turns out if you fix
Yeah.
cardiovascular disease, a lot of the other diseases seem to also get fixed as well, metabolic diseases. But how would you solve it? How do you create an aging vaccine from first principles? So certainly at Gemical, we're thinking of, okay, it's going to be difficult to do all at once, though some people are thinking about that. Let's think about clusters of diseases. So you've got cancer, you've got cardiovascular, you've got neurodegenerative diseases. Let's start looking at cancer to start off with. Can we actually find a drug that can, first of all, cure cancer, and lots of
Right.
cancers at the same time, but without harming the good cells. So you can kill cancer cells. A lot of these press releases you see of early stage announcements is where you can kill cancer cells or you can kill pathogens. But unfortunately, they kill our good cells too. So that's not very useful. Kill the bad cell without harming the good cell. We're going to kill the bad cells without harming the good cells. And so, how do we do that? First of all, computationally, without even touching people, because we don't want to touch people without doing an exhaustive search. Well, there's all these databases on gene expressions. So DNA is how we're made up. It's the same the DNA in every single cell, depending whether you're irrespective of whether you're a stomach cell or a skin cell, but they're expressed differently. And there's some of them times they're expressed so that they are susceptible to cancer. The cell replicates ad nauseum when you don't want it to, and that creates tumors. And so we want to say, well, what are those? Which drugs can actually affect those gene expressions? And there's certainly at Gemica, we take the view of, well, let's not invent any new drugs. Let's just repurpose existing drugs and look at as many cancers as possible without affecting the good cells. And so we're up to about 30 cancers now. It might be, I know, really, there's about 100 cancers and many subcancers, where we've computationally figured out potential combinations that can kill cancer cells without uh, killing the good cells. So that now has to go to the next step, a humanized mouse. This is a mouse where the immune system's been replaced with a human immune system, so it gets as close as you can to a human rather than a mouse. The big critique of mouse studies is that mice are not humans. They're like a fraction of the size. They're completely different immune systems. But can we replace systems that are closer to us?
Yeah, I think the focus right now is more on, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the focus is more on the chronic diseases or specific conditions like cancer and the disease uh, which are having more death ratio, right? Than uh, just putting some cellular or injecting vaccine to a person who is 60 years or 65 years but totally fit. Or you think inventions are happening in both this?
Okay, that's the next step. So fine. So someone's got cancer, someone's got cardiovascular disease. How do we fix that? Okay, the next step though, how do you stop them getting it? So that's
Yeah,
already fit,
yeah,
right? That's a different problem, right? Now, and again, it's a stepping stone approach. Can we can we actually remove it first of all,
yeah.
and then can we actually train the body
Mhm.
to recognize certain signatures that it sees, to remove those if it sees them. And so that is a different step of the process, um, to target very surgically the exact signature from
Mhm.
happening in the first place.
Yeah.
As soon as it starts happening, and there's a famous book called The First Cell by Dr. Azra from Columbia University. It basically says, look, once you've got one cancer cell, game over. It's too late. It metastasizes, it replicates. Um, you have to catch it before it happens or at the first. And there's that view that another view of tackling that problem is screening.
Mhm.
So screen, can you screen for different cancers? Which is why women should take mammograms, colon cancer, should take colonoscopies when they get to a certain age. Do screening so you don't even get the first cell because it's as soon as you get the first cell, you're behind the eight ball, and so that's the next step. But do it computationally. You can now sort of go computationally design peptides, which peptides target compounds that only compound attached to certain proteins. We want to have those attached to only cancer proteins, not normal proteins. Proteins are you might have heard of proteins that, you have meat and fish, they're proteins, but proteins tell our cells what to do,
Yeah.
right? That's what they do. So that's the biological format.
Yeah.
If they tell us the wrong thing to do,
Ah.
then that's how we get these diseases. So can we stop those? can we tack those proteins in at that level?
How soon do you think such kind of medicines or vaccines will be available for commonly use in the market? Maybe 1 decade, 2 decades? How soon? What is your vision on that?
I think, well, I need it before 2 decades. So I think, it depends on the approach. So we have other companies, like Ixana, which is trying to solve, age-related macular degeneration, right? And, they're fairly far along, just about to enter trials, and, they want to, that's more of a gene therapy
Yeah.
approach. That's a more, the other approach, the adjunct approach, is repurposing drugs. So you can actually go rapidly through what we call the safety trial because they already exist. They're already being proven to be safe. They're not proven to safe as combinations,
Yeah.
but have been proven to be safe, as individual drugs. So, that's what, if you take the repurposing approach, is sub 10 years. If you're going to need new chemical entities, it's probably 15 to 20 years.
I think still a lot of discovery and invention need to be there. And has AI really impacted on the trial timelines? Because uh, that is what we have been hearing, that if AI is plugged into the trial phase, instead of 10 years, it might just take 2 years, right? Is it coming true, or what is your
Well,
take?
there is a physical time domain of just collecting, nothing to do with AIs.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess you could do matching quicker and easier, but you still have to do the recruitment of patients, recruitments of trial patients, and you just still have to monitor them by definition for months, years even.
Mm.
How do you know it prevents you from getting a disease forever unless you're monitoring it forever?
Yeah.
Right, the usual argument, we know how the mechanism works, but, often you don't know what you don't know. You have unforeseen circumstances, and, it's really the anti-vax movement talks about these kinds of things, and so you have to do a lot of, investigation to make sure it's at minimum safe, it doesn't
Yeah.
harm you, but actually, does it work? Does a modification of it need to work? So I think the trial phase, there's something called adaptive trials,
Mm.
which, is trying to essentially use, Bayesian statistics to actually decide which doses, which drugs, which patients, should be set up. And you can think of what's called the drop the loser design. This was used extensively during COVID, where we just physically didn't have enough time to get results. You have lots of people taking different samples,
Yeah.
and as soon as one thing looks like it's not working, you just drop that arm of investigation and concentrate on the ones that are working, and that can speed it up. There's something called, conjoint analysis as well. That's like used in marketing often when want to build a phone. Do you have to have one with a big battery and a big screen, or would you rather have one that's small screen, small battery, but cheaper and a better camera? If you tried every single combination of a product line for your phone, you wouldn't be able to have enough people to ask the question. So what you do is you give clusters
Hmm.
of different feature sets,
Yeah.
and then you can compute mathematically and interpret what the best feature set is. So you can kind of do that in trial design as well. Have different combinations of things that are probed, different doses, different combinations for different people, to see, okay, we actually interpret this is the best, approach. And that could be none of that. The best approach might not be any of the tests. And then you go forward with that one with the next, with more of a proper, trial design. So certainly you've got this physical logistics part. Now, certainly if you've got more probability of success, then you can actually, make the money go further into trial and trial design, because part of the issue is a huge failure rate,
Right.
loss of money and loss of capital.
Yeah. I think it is good that all the permutation combinations are kept in mind before actually releasing to the public. Otherwise, it's not that
Well,
lasting, right?
that's the whole point of the trial,
The
yes.
whole
The
point.
problem is, what is the combination, right? And how can you do it, safely?
Yeah. And coming back to longevity thing, it was, this topic is very interesting, right? And I came across certain news articles and certain videos where I saw that a father already injected his uh, kid's cells into his body in attempt to slow down the aging process. And the same he did with his dad. He provided his cells to his body. I don't know how true is that, but that was something I was going through. So I just wanted to check with you. Have you seen all of this happening? And if it is happening, is it for general public or it is under the trial or some specific people only?
So I think what you're referring to is blood transfusion, or plasma transfusion, as opposed to the actual cells.
So
So
I just saw, the cell movement from one body to another. I don't know. I do not have the full information. Just wanted to talk to you.
yeah, I'm not sure. I've not seen cells. No, people injecting heart cells into other people. But I've seen blood's quite because that happens anyway. People have blood transfusions all the time.
Yeah, blood transfusion is okay, which is common, but this was something which striked, and then maybe I'll have to research more.
Yeah, I think I know the incidents. It was blood transfusion from from him to his father, and from his son to himself, and it was a blood transfusion, and that's quite common. You could probably get it done because if the blood type matches, which it probably
But
does.
does it really help in reducing the age or slowing down the aging?
Unsure, potentially. There certainly seems like there's something in the blood that seems to help. Uh, and it looks like it might even be something in the plasma. So what some other people are doing, the blood is made out of different components, the blood part, and then there's the plasma part, which doesn't have the blood cells.
Mm.
And there's some labs and some companies that are trying to transfuse young plasma into people. So you take young
I
plasma,
think it was young plasma.
yeah, plasma from a young person.
Yeah.
And again, that I believe is doable. Certainly in some states, it's doable because essentially it's a proxy for blood transfusion. You has to match, and also has to be matched by sex as well. Male plasma to male person, female plasma
Mhm.
to female person, and so people are doing that today in some states in the US and some countries. It is not FDA approved,
Okay.
at least to my knowledge. I think blood transfusion is FDA approved, so people can do that. Plasma transfusion, I don't think is. Or I remain to be corrected. Maybe someone in the audience knows. Um, and people are doing it. It's probably if it's and the other issue is, are there any pathogens in the blood? Is it screened? But a
Mm.
lot of these blood transfusion centers are now got things in process for that because they have to for general transfusion purposes.
Yeah.
But there's always that risk that
Yes.
that there may be a pathogen from the donor. But if it's screened and matched, then people are doing it. And to my knowledge, people are collecting experiments on whether it works or not.
Or not. Yeah, absolutely. So I would like to know a couple of exciting breakthroughs in cellular programming. You have been working in this field from many decades, I would say. So what so far you have seen that, one or two is fine, that
Certainly. So
extraordinary.
yeah, it's not so much me, but what I'm looking at and what other people have done. So it turns out if you could change four things in the cell, four parts of the gene in the cell. This is discovered by Yamanaka from Japan in 2012, for which he got the Nobel Prize for. You can change a cell from its current age to a cell of age 0. And that shouldn't surprise you as much because it happens all the time. We actually create cells of age 0 all the time. When you get a 30-year-old female and you get a 30-year-old male, miraculously, we get a creature with 0 age cells called a
Mhm.
baby. So why can't we do that for ourselves instead? Instead of doing it for a baby, can we do that for ourselves?
Yeah, that's
Uh,
pretty interesting. Yeah.
right? So that's really the theory behind it. And the theory is if you can change Well, it turns out 3 of the 4, because one of the 4th ones, it starts to give you cancer if you change it. But, if creates teratomas and the like. So what several companies, are looking at that, Turn.bio is looking at that, is can you think of it as the software of the cell.
Mm-hmm.
Can you actually change the software of the cell so that it is now at age 0, so-called xenomorphic as opposed to senolytic. So the one idea is to kill your old cells, right? Just kill them. But the other idea is to turn it back into a younger cell, morphic. There's a play on the word senescent. Senescent means old, senescent cells. And I think, these are like new chemical entities that people are looking at. So, it's probably 10 to 15 years where we're looking at where it's actually sort of hits mainstream. But, it's a bit like doing AI in 1983. Yeah, before you know it, 20 years is up and you've got a solution.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting to see as well. And our body, like how you mentioned it, it's incredible. And there are a lot of hidden things, right, which still is under discovery. So I'm pretty sure that 15, 20 years, by the time at least I'm alive, I would really like to see some kind of innovations like this. So, Dr. Nag, beyond your contribution in the lab, working in the lab, you have also done a lot of contribution and you are doing it constantly in educating people and mentorship, right? From helping startups to navigate their growth journey to teaching transformative courses at Stanford University. So, how your role as an educator and mentor is shaping this leadership world and innovation?
Well, certainly, I think the common theme is understanding. And so my speciality is trying to take complex science subjects and explain them in simple terms, and also on a step-by-step manner, sort of from what we call first principles thinking. Does it just because you don't have a white coat and you don't have a PhD in this subject, not patronize the students, not patronize every. We can all understand it. How do we? And if we can't understand it, do you really understand it? Richard Feynman famously said that anyone who says they understand quantum mechanics just means they don't understand quantum mechanics because it's so complex. So, can we actually work from first principles and empower people to think for themselves? People are frightened by AI. What's the impact? Is it going to take their job away? Is it going to? There's many positive parts, we've talked about already in longevity and drug discovery and
Yeah.
inventing machines and things like that, and commoditizing the ability to start inventing and being an entrepreneur. Many negative parts as well that people are talking about that says it will do everything. There won't be any jobs left. And what will I do then? And the main thing there is understand. If you understand where it can be used and not used, then you can actually take the bull by the horns and actually see what part you can play and be realistic. You can know where potentially, well, this piece of work is going to be automated eventually, and this piece of work isn't. Where can I play, and what is my purpose in life? What is my purpose in society? And so I sort of have that in the background when I talk to students or mentor entrepreneurs who are maybe not students as such, but trying to think what applications their product can be applied to, how they should approach it. Because I have 100 companies,
Mm-hmm.
sort of cut across those companies, see which companies are doing things and what approaches, not the actual products, but what approaches can be used in other companies. So that's what I think is really why I'm involved in teaching, and I enjoy talking to smart people, and really, when you're working with startup founders, you get education you can't even get at a university. By definition, they're working at cutting edges outside of what the university's teaching their students for. And then when I go back to the universities, that's my what I hope can transmit and learnings at the cutting edge, learnings at the coal face.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so inspiring. And we have seen your LinkedIn and we have also researched a lot about you and got to know that you have got numerous recognitions, awards throughout your incredible career, right? So, what is the one message you would like to share with the aspiring people, those who want to make a difference in technology and science?
Yes, the one thing I think is be curious. Yeah, be curious, and don't have white coat syndrome or inferiority syndrome. If you can't understand what's being told to you, it's not your issue. It's the person talking to you. It's their issue, right?
That's very well said. Yeah. So I think that's all. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights and inspiring me. And I am pretty sure my audience will be liking this podcast, Tech Talk with you.